Welcome to the teaching ministry of B.D. Hyman. B.D. Hyman's teachings will prepare you to face life's difficult challenges through the power and knowledge of God's Word. Join us now as we discover the truth in God's Word with B.D. Hyman.
Hello and welcome. As most of you know, I am the only natural daughter of film icon Bette Davis. I am going to share my testimony with you and explain how I got from there to where I am today. And it is indeed an interesting and amazing journey. I grew up around famous people. All the people in the headlines, in the newspapers and on television, etc., were my friends and acquaintances. They were frequently in our home and we were in theirs. Elvis Presley was a friend. He lived down the road in Bel Air, one of his homes. And things happened to me that were not usual. For instance, Frank Sinatra was a friend. And so when JFK was inaugurated, he gave one of the inaugural balls for JFK, Jack Kennedy. And I was seated between Frank and Jack Kennedy at the table for the dinner part of the inaugural ball. And I took these things for granted. It was something that was just a natural part of my life. I didn't see anything exceptional about it at the time. I look back on it now and it was very different than most people's experiences, but that was the world that I was in. That was the world Mother was in. And unlike most children of the famous people I knew, I traveled with her. Most children were left home to be looked after by the staff, and the servants became their family because they hardly ever saw their actual parents. Mother, on the other hand, who considered me her personal possession and even actually said that I was an immaculate conception because she didn't want anyone else to have anything to do with my creation, wanted me with her all the time. She wanted me to become an extension of her, a clone, if you will. And so because of that, I had the advantage of traveling. Later on, it was not such a great thing, but at the time, I did have a very broad experience in the world. I traveled with her all over the United States. I traveled with her to Europe and other countries when she was filming in different locations around the world. And I was always around very interesting people, very unusual people, some of them nice, some of them not, like anything else. But it was what I did. And I even took an occasional small role in a movie in my teens, and I modeled. I worked in photographic modeling, not runway modeling, but photographic modeling, which I enjoyed when we lived in Manhattan and Mother was doing a Broadway play. And I got into that. I had horses. I've always loved horses. And I showed my horses, and the horses traveled with us as well. Not to Europe, but all around the country. They were on whichever coast I was on. And that's basically how I met my husband, Jeremy, because he was part of the production company that made a movie called Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. His cousin Ken was actually the hands-on producer. He was a film executive. And when that movie was taken to the Cannes Film Festival, he was the only bachelor with the company that produced the movie, and he was assigned to escort me to the opening night. At the time, I was 16. He was almost 30. He was 30 by the time we got married. He was actually 29 at the time. And he was really unhappy about having to escort this rude American actress's 16-year-old daughter, do you blame him, to the opening night. He just was infuriated that his company required this of him. And I was not too happy because I wanted to go and meet people and not be assigned to some producer who I thought was going to be most unpleasant for the evening. And that's how we met. We immediately were drawn to each other. He was not what I expected. I was not what he expected. I looked about 20, acted about 20. He was young and very handsome, and that's not what I was used to. So this was the beginning of our life together. And he was actually the youngest man I had dated for quite a while. At 11 years old, Mother had given me my 21st birthday party and declared that I was an adult. She wanted a companion, not a daughter. But she wanted a companion who was her extension in the sense of being her daughter. And so I had a very adult life, and my friends were adults. I didn't relate to children. We had a tutor who traveled with us for my schooling, which took care of that problem. And life was a very different experience than most young people's. Jeremy and I have joked over the years about love at first sight. We just can't imagine that it would work out. And of course, that was 1963. And 7 months later, we were married and have been married ever since. So we're still waiting to see if it's going to work out. But it was definitely one of those extraordinary things. And we now know, now that we both are part of God and in Christ, that God had ordained this. The circumstances of our meeting were so unusual, and so many different factors were involved to put us together, that we were quite sure years later that God had ordained it, and our marriage has proved that out. We know that we were meant to be. And at the time, however, we considered it the fates. We considered it good luck, because we had no thought of God. Neither one of us had any interest in God. Jeremy had been in an English school, church 6 times a week, twice on Sunday. God was an optional extra. And I had never had any church experience except to go to weddings or visit once in a while for some reason. And so the Lord was not even in our thinking. And we were just moving along through life and very happy to find each other. We had planned to live in London, which was where Jeremy was working at the time, and his company wound up moving him to New York, and so that's where we began our life. We were married in California, big wedding. Mother had a wonderful time, put on an extravaganza, and we lived in Manhattan, and then about a year after that, we bought a house in Connecticut, and Jeremy commuted for a while until he went into business for himself. The only cloud on our horizon, if you will, was the fact that my mother was obsessively controlling. She was on the phone every day. She wanted to make sure that everything was done her way, which of course was not the way we wanted it done. And the fact that we were happy together infuriated her. She had this plan, and she had told me this plan. I didn't have to figure it out. That she would give me this wonderful wedding and be this magnanimous parent to allow me to marry at 16. And at the end of 6 months, vacation over, I was supposed to divorce Jeremy and be back home as her companion. That was her plan. It was not mine. So after the 6 months, she became increasingly angry and just outraged that I was not doing what she told me to do. And I didn't know until I met Jesus when I was 36 that this spirit of control is a vicious thing. I thought it was just a neurotic movie star being neurotic. I thought I could deal with it. I thought I could handle it, like so many of you with similar parents, even though not necessarily as famous, but same spirit. And so I kept trying to control this thing. And it wasn't until I learned that I was dealing with principalities and powers and mights and dominions and all kinds of demonic forces that I was able to understand why she was the way she was. And when I didn't do as she wanted, didn't fall in with her plans, she then left her California home and took up residence in a suite in the Plaza Hotel so that she could not only call me every day, but just walk in and out of my apartment whenever she wanted, and interfere in many, many, many ways. Mother was determined to separate me from Jeremy and have me back no matter what it took. She had divorced my natural father when I was 3, and typical of her and the demons that she served, she eradicated him from our lives. No pictures, no contact, no mention, nothing. He was gone. And she married my stepfather, Gary Merrill, who was an actor, and he was an abusive drunk. It was something that dominated my young life, and Mother had a need for abusive men. It was a history with her. And since he not only abused her, but abused me, she required and told me that I had to keep it a secret because it was something that she didn't want to end. And if I ever told anybody, she said she would call me a liar, and of course they would believe her. And I saw no reason why they wouldn't believe her. And so I kept it quiet. And finally, at 13, when I was 13, she did divorce my stepfather, which was a great relief to me, and I testified in court, and the judge said that I did not ever have to see him again. No visitation necessary, and that part of my life, blessedly, was over. But Mother's possession of me at that point became even worse. I became the substitute for all the failed relationships because she felt that she could totally control me. And as a child, of course, with a parent, the parent must exercise a certain amount of control over the child. But with Mother, it was a far more intense thing. It was truly an obsession. She abused everyone verbally, and Jeremy was no exception. She was nasty to him. She tried embarrassing him in public so many times I lost track. We eventually decided not to go anywhere in public where she was, let alone with her, because that was her intention. And if she couldn't get me to leave Jeremy, then her new tack was to try and get Jeremy to leave me in order to get away from her. We're very grateful that none of it worked, but she tried very hard. And when we left New York City and moved to Connecticut, she very shortly thereafter bought a house 1 mile down the road from us. And she just marched in and out of our lives. She did what she wanted, short of physically dealing with her and throwing her out. There was no way of stopping her, and there was a force behind it. My mother was formidable. Everybody who worked with her said she was almost unbearable at times. And in her later career, it was very hard for her to even find work because directors and producers and other actors did not want to work with her. And I didn't realize, of course, at this time, because I didn't recognize the Lord, and I also didn't recognize the power of Satan. I didn't think he was any more real than God was. I was totally ignorant. I was a blank slate. The world called my mindset an agnostic. I wasn't willing to say God didn't exist. I wasn't that emphatic about it, but I didn't know whether he did or not, and I didn't think I cared. And so we went along with our lives as totally secular people, and I tried to deal with this spirit of control in the flesh. And I tried everything. I tried being so nice. I was little Mary Sunshine. I was Pollyanna. And yet, when she entered our borders, as it were, that dark cloud came with her. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand how, despite everybody else being the way they'd always been, and even trying to make this work, she overpowered everyone. This is the spirit of control, and I have since ministered this greatly. It's the place my ministry began, actually, was ministering about this spirit of control and how to escape it and what it is and how it works. And it is very much a part of witchcraft. And as time went along, I realized how deeply my mother was in the occult. And I didn't talk about it publicly a long time ago because I didn't want my children, who were then young, to have to deal with all the strange reaction to people knowing these things. But I was aware of her witchcraft. I'd been aware of it as a child. I'd been aware of strange rituals that she went through that didn't make any sense to me, and I thought she was either drunk, which she was a lot of the time, or just completely into some kind of a role-playing situation. I wasn't sure what it was until I met Jesus and learned the truth. But many of you deal with the spirit of control. The spirit of control wants to own, wants to possess. It doesn't care if it destroys the object of its control. All my life, my mother said to me that everybody else had betrayed her, everybody else had deserted her, and I was the only thing, operable word, thing, that she loved. I was the only thing that she loved. And that's because she did believe that she could totally possess me. She believed, because she didn't believe in God either, or any power beyond her own. She believed in her total power. And so she believed that she had created me somehow. And therefore, she had the right to own me, to dictate to me, to mold me in her image. And that's what the spirit of control tries to do. And that same spirit tries to get between anyone that the object of their control is involved with and them. They don't share. Sharing is not part of the plan, the program. I tried so many times thinking in the natural and dealing in the natural to explain to my mother that I could love her and love Jeremy and later on love my sons. And there was enough love to go around, that she didn't get less because I loved my family. But this is a demonic thing. And always remember, you cannot reason with demons. Even if you can get them to agree with you right this minute, and there were moments when I would get Mother to actually agree with what I was saying, but 5 minutes later, that's all over. Forget it. It never happened. Now we're back to the demonic reality, not anything else. So, this requires deliverance. And since we cannot override someone else's free will, God won't do it, and therefore we certainly can't. We cannot force someone who is controlling, who is into witchcraft, to be delivered. They think they're just fine. They think you have the problem. Sound familiar? Yep. And so, because of that, you have to remove yourself. And that's what I finally learned, and it took me a long time. But I finally learned that I had to remove myself, and it was only when I found Jesus, or he found me, and it was only when I understood the things of the supernatural that I saw that there was no way of dealing with this thing. Therefore, no way of dealing with my mother, and I had to remove myself, and therefore my very grateful family, from her influence. And then there has to be a great deal of spiritual warfare to keep those spirits of control on the other side of the blood. We must understand that everything is spiritual war. And I was at a disadvantage back then because I didn't know anything about spiritual war. And I was trying to deal with it by being so nice that it didn't matter, or by joining her at times in her fury and her anger and her aggressive behavior. And I would match her behavior, aggression for aggression. Didn't do any good. She got stronger and I was drained. And that's what happens. And so as those I have ministered to over the years have learned how to be delivered from this possession, this ownership that control requires, I have been able to help people move away from the things that have destroyed them. Most people who I minister to have had at least one marriage destroyed. I was very blessed not to have that happen. But most people are not made of stern enough stuff, which fortunately my husband was, to deal with this barrage, to deal with this onslaught of vicious behavior. And I have no bitterness about it. I've long since forgiven her and forgiven my stepfather and everybody else in my past, because that's what is required by God, and that is the only way that you can have peace. When I was first born again, the first thing the Lord told me to do when I heard his voice audibly the first time was to forgive my stepfather. And I told him that that was impossible. And he said, no, it's not impossible. It's absolutely required. And once I did, I had no more emotions about him at all. I had been seething with hatred toward him all my life. But once I forgave him, that hatred left, and my being unsettled by it left. So I want you to get this testimony set. It is called Long Day's Journey into Light, because that's what my journey has been. And I welcome the opportunity to share it with you, to tell you about the things that I've learned, to tell you the things that God opened to me along the way, so that I learned how to be more than a conqueror in Christ Jesus. And the whole story is really an amazing journey. Testimonies are frequently an amazing journey. But when I think of where I began and the way I used to think and who I was before I met the Lord, and all the changes that have happened since I met him, it becomes even more amazing to me to think that I got to where I am today. Because in the natural realm, the odds were certainly against me. When I came to know the Lord, I was not looking for him. He was looking for me. And I was not in a desperate place. I was in a place of complacency. And yet, he reached out and revealed himself to me, so that I would know that he was the one who was missing in my life. I had a wonderful husband. I had wonderful kids. I had a neurotic lunatic for a mother, but that I had always dealt with, and I didn't think that there was anything particularly threatening about that. I was to learn later that had I not met him then, things could have come unraveled very quickly. And so I want you to get this testimony set and walk with me through my experience and learn all the power and glory of God, and how it is absolutely possible to overcome anything. And nothing with Christ is impossible. No matter what the devil tries to do to you, you have the upper hand if you know how to use it. If you know how to fight the spiritual war and win. You can't get out of it. You can't find a demilitarized zone. You either win it or you lose it. And I want to help teach you how to win every time in every situation. The spirit of control is demonic, but it is also not just a random thing. It is attached to witchcraft. Mother, as I said, practiced the occult throughout her life, and I had observed it. I didn't know what it was, but I had observed it. She collected houses the way most women collect jewelry. She loved houses, and she had them all over the place. And the one that we spent the most of my childhood years in, back and forth to, but most of the time in, was a house on the coast of Maine, which she named Witch Way, W-I-T-C-H, Witch Way. And that delighted her, because she said the greatest witch of them all, herself, lived there. She was proud of it. She was delighted with it. And most people didn't take her seriously, including me, because it wasn't a reality to them. Her favorite roles were things like playing Queen Elizabeth I, where she could send people to the Tower and cut their heads off, and she would often say that she would love to be able to do that to people who crossed her, who thwarted her, to send them to the Tower and have their heads cut off. And people, again, thought it was funny. I knew it was real. When she was gutting fish, which she loved to do, she would always get fish whole from the fishmonger, and she would gut them herself and rip their insides out, mumbling the names of people to whom she wished she could do the same thing. This is not normal behavior, folks. And even though I had a life of luxury and privilege, limousines, traveling, all of these things, behind closed doors was very dark, was very, very dark indeed. And Mother continued to try to end my marriage. And as I said, at first it was merely annoying, and then it escalated. It very quickly became far more than that. Jeremy was able to mostly ignore her tantrums. He was not pleased with them, but he was able to stonewall them. And I was constantly apologizing to him for her. There was no excuse for her behavior. But miraculously, our marriage remained unscathed. Years later, Mother found other ways to get even with me. One of those ways was cursing my oldest son with severe mental illness, which she had threatened to do, and I didn't take her seriously. And this happened when he was in college, as I said, many years later. But she couldn't get at me, she couldn't get at Jeremy, so she tried to destroy me through my children. And she sent rebellion against my younger son, I'm convinced of it. She sent this mental illness against my older son. But I continued to think that I could handle it. I could handle her. I could juggle. I could balance her needs and my family's needs and my needs, and I could keep it all glued together. That was my perception of it at the time. I really believed that if I just did something better, I could handle it. And I know there are many of you who are in that same place. And it doesn't usually work out well. I will let you know how it worked out for me next time. But the complications of my life became extreme until God entered and began sorting them out one by one. And things don't work out well until we give them to God, until we let Him do it. I will see you next time, and I will continue with the story. Meanwhile, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
We trust that you have been encouraged in God's Word during this broadcast. If you have and would like others to enjoy the teaching, write to us. Or to order materials or to make a gift by phone, you can by calling the phone number on the screen.